Video. You got to be on YouTube. It's not enough to just show up places. You've got to be on YouTube. You have to have a blog. You have to be on Twitter and Facebook. And I'm on all those things. And some of my cousins tune in to my Facebook. So I'm Barbara Falconer Newhall, and I've been looking forward to reading from my book here in Pentwater for a long time. There's a particular passage in here that takes place close by, and when I wrote that, I thought I've got to go read that to the people there because I know they'll recognize it. My father grew up in Scottsville. He's a Falconer and had 6 brothers and sisters, and most of that family has dispersed. But I'll be reading at the Ludington Library tomorrow. And my mother spent summers here at Bass Lake at Camp Morrison. So, anybody remember Camp Morrison?
I know.
Yeah, so Mary Helen's and my great-grandfather and great-grandmother founded Camp Morrison. Then it eventually was passed on to Mary Helen's parents, and now it's owned by Reg. So it's changed a lot over the years, but I remember that place as a little kid, and our great-grandfather calling the square dances and calling the bingo games and leading the campfire songs. And we would spend, my mother and my brothers and I would spend the entire summer up here, and my father would come up and visit, which a lot of people did. So our mothers spent summers here as children. Our grandmother Toto, Florence White, spent summers here, and then winters eventually, but summers as a girl, and then of course our great-grandmother had the resort here. And it turns out, I was really disappointed to learn that Arthur Morrison, was actually not my real great-grandfather. He was my step-great-grandfather, but he was a wonderful man, and I hope to write a little bit about him one of these days. So now I grew up mainly in Detroit and Birmingham, and now I live in California. So I don't get here very often, but I have dreams about this place because it means a lot to me being here in the summertime and being able to run around barefoot with my cousin Jeannie, his big sister. So I'm going to read a passage, and I'm going to quiz you and see if you recognize the place. So this story, it comes out of my experience as the religion reporter at the Contra Costa Times in San Francisco Bay Area. I met a lot of interesting people, but it was always a quick, superficial interview that I had with people, and I wanted to talk to them more deeply. But I'll explain a little bit more about that after. So it began as a collection of other people's stories, but then I had to do something to connect all those very disparate stories, and so I wound up having to put my own spiritual journey, such as it was, into the book. This starts out early on with this. When I was a child, God was very real to me. As a little kid in Detroit, I loved Sunday school at our local Presbyterian church, and later as a teenager, I looked forward to choir practice and youth group. The others in my family were indifferent church goers. My father was a lapsed Methodist church here in Scottsville. My mother had been a Catholic as a girl, but undertook an extended leave of absence from her church when she married my father. My brothers, well, they just didn't find God all that interesting. But I did. I believed in God, and I loved Jesus, the Galilean carpenter who walked on water and calmed the raging sea, who gave sight to the blind, who cared for the poor and the weak, as well as the powerful, who died and rose from the dead, as I would someday. God was real to me in those long ago days. God's existence was not something I arrived at intellectually. It was something I just knew. One summer day when I was 12 years old, I fell asleep on a beach and got a glimpse of God, face to face. The encounter, God's and mine, took place near my family's summer cottage at the spot where a small, murky brown channel, alive with minnows, pollywogs, algae, decaying weeds, bits of oak leaf, and rotting birch bark, empties itself into the great blue Lake Michigan. I was flat on my back, the sun was warm, and a touch of air was moving in off the lake. I fell into sleep, and there, awaiting me, of course, was God. Around me, below me, above me was God. God knows who I am, I thought. Of course he does. How could it be otherwise? I turned as warm and liquid as the water flowing past me into the lake. All too soon, something woke me up. The sun going behind a cloud, a seagull snapping its wings overhead, and I drifted up from sleep. I was back on my beach. God, the vividness, the clarity of it, was gone. But I felt embraced by the world as it truly was. Things changed when I graduated from high school and went off to Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan. I told my first academic advisor that I liked to read, and he signed me up for a course in great books. Eagerly, I dove into Lucretius, Aristotle, Virgil, Dante, Milton. My freshman year, instead of God, I thought about books. For my sophomore Philosophy 101 class, I acquired a fat red book of 800 plus pages. It was Being and Nothingness by Jean-Paul Sartre. I thought Sartre was awfully long-winded, but my philosophy professor seemed to think he spoke the truth. Our lives have no meaning, Sartre claimed. That's the nothingness. The being is, we go ahead and live them anyway. We make do without God. We tough it out. Later, we read Bertrand Russell, who took great pleasure in unleashing his wit upon Christianity and its adherents. Religion is based on fear, he wrote, partly the terror of the unknown and partly the wish to feel that you have a kind of elder brother who will stand by you in all your troubles. We must learn to stand on our own 2 feet, Russell admonished. We must get along without God. I was unable to stand on my own 2 feet against Russell, Sartre, and my philosophy professor. I decided that if I wanted to be taken seriously in academia and in the professional world beyond, if I wanted to think of myself as an intellectual, I'd probably have to do without God. This was a sad realization, frightening even. I was facing a world without meaning, in which I was an inconsequential accident of atoms and space. There was no God up there looking out for me and throwing good things my way. I realized with a thud that finding a life partner, getting a career started, and making the moral choices would be up to me from now on. I'd be on my own. I'd have to tough it out. And that is what I have done for much of my life. Tough it out. Every once in a while, I'll find myself on that Lake Michigan beach, or I'll be writing something, or taking a photograph, or talking with a fellow traveler on the journey. And I'll feel God's presence. And for a breathless moment, I'll remember and think, yes, God is here. Of course God is here. How could it be otherwise? But that is only some of the time. Most of the time, I have lived with the otherwise. So, okay, now it's the quiz. What's the beach?
Outlet.
Yeah, the outlet beach at Bass Lake, yeah. So, yeah, I spent we have pictures of me as a little kid there, my children as little kids, my mother as a little kid, and Mary Helen as a little kid. And so, anyway, it's quite a history. So this pretty well explains where I am, and so that's why this is called Wrestling with God, because it's something I've done my entire adult life. And I continue to do, but not so much as I did before I started writing this book, because actually the one thing that came out of it was this sense of because I really wanted to know, what's God like? Is there a God? What's God like? And so I went out and asked all these, the big question I asked all these people I interviewed was, what's God like? Tell me about God. And I was hoping to get a thunderbolt that would make it all clear. Well, I never got the thunderbolt, and it never came clear. But what I did come to was just an acceptance of the fact that God is really, really big. I can't know what God is like, but I'm here and I'm alive, and it's a miracle. That's miraculous. I mean, here we are, sitting here. That's conscious, and we get to have this moment. Even if we don't get to have any others, we've got this one. So I learned that from the atheist that I interviewed. He said he just looks at the world and he finds it. He used that word, miraculous. But the person probably who taught me the most was a Buddhist. He used to be a Buddhist monk. Now he's a Buddhist teacher. His name is Martin Verhoeven. And so I interviewed about 50 people for this book, and about 16 of them, 20 of them got into the book because it was hard work, paring those stories down and making them into a readable, gripping story. But one of my favorite interviews, who really helped me a lot, was this Buddhist, and he was doing really well. He had a Ford Foundation grant at Stanford. He was a big intellectual. He was very high level. I forget what his field was, some kind of sociology. So it's a Ford Foundation grant at Stanford, and then he encountered this Buddhist teacher, and before he knew it, he was a monk. And before he knew it, he was doing a 650-mile bowing pilgrimage from Los Angeles to Ukiah. So that's from LA all the way up the California coast, through San Francisco, and on up to a town called Ukiah. 650 miles. They went through the most difficult parts of LA, and got kids were shooting pea shooters at them, and so it was 3 steps and a bow, a full prostration, head to the ground, bow to the pavement of Highway 101, or Highway 1. So they thought it would take a year, but it wound up taking 2.5 years to do this. And their teacher would come and visit them periodically and pull up in the Chevy and give them a teaching. And but they had all kinds of adventures on this trip, and they had to rely on donations from people for food, and even their shoes. People would notice that their shoes had worn through, so they'd bring them some new tennis shoes. So they were totally mendicant monks doing this bowing pilgrimage. So at one point, and the other monk's name was Hung Shur. At one point, Hung Shur and I were in Big Sur, so this is this gorgeous place south of San Francisco. We had been bowing for 1.5 years, and we were still hundreds of miles from our destination. It was November or December, the rainy season in California, when it gets down to about 40 degrees and it rains, and the days were short and cold. We had wet clothing during the day and wet sleeping bags at night. Oh, they slept in a station wagon. So he would drive the station wagon ahead, then they'd go back and they'd do the bowing, then they'd climb in the back of the station wagon and sleep there. And they had whatever clothes and food they had was in this station wagon. The days were short and cold. We had wet clothing during the day and wet sleeping bags at night. We were miserable. We were camped under the redwoods in a big state camping ground, reading the Avatamsaka Sutra. That was what they were studying, this ancient Buddhist text, in the back of the station wagon, by the light of the oil lamp, which is their light. The passage that night from the Avatamsaka Sutra was about giving. It's called dana. Quote, "A bodhisattva is not stingy," the text said. "A truly wise person gives away what he has to benefit living beings." Well, just as we finished reading all about dana, this man comes along and he's half naked, wild hair, scraggly, unkempt, unshaven, and smelly. "You guys got anything?" he says. At first we thought he was just a mooch, but then we started writing notes back and forth. Now the other guy had taken a vow of silence, so they communicated by writing notes. So we started writing notes back and forth, and we said, "Whoa, maybe this is a bodhisattva." a spiritual being come to test us. Maybe it's a sign that we are spiritually blessed. We'll give him some of our clothes. So we gave the beggar a pair of monk's pants, a jacket, a wool hat, and a new pair of shoes. You got anything else? The beggar says. It's cold out here. Now we're both thinking, oh yes, this is a test from heaven. So we say, here, take our sleeping bags. Take our rubber boots. Do you need more food? Pretty soon, we've emptied out the station wagon to this guy. Night is coming on, the wagon has no heater, and the beggar is gone. Hung Shur writes on his notepad, we forgot to bow to him. I nod. I was thinking the same thing. We'd missed our chance. If we'd bowed to the man, maybe he would have given us enlightenment. Pretty soon, a park police car pulls up with its lights flashing, and he got the beggar by the scruff of the neck. Excuse me, venerables, this guy claims you gave him all his stuff. Is that true? We nod our heads. Uh-huh. This ranger is this square-jawed, square-shouldered, Midwestern kind of guy. I got an immediate picture of what he was talking about. I don't know, I must have a stereotype in my mind too. He looks at us like we didn't understand what he just said. You know, we've been having a lot of thievery in the campground, and we're pretty sure this is the guy. And he's looking in the back of our station wagon, and there's nothing in it. I mean, he didn't hold a knife on you or anything? Oh, no, officer. And we're putting our palms together, thinking now is our chance to bow to the beggar. We each do a little head bow, and the cop says, okay, and takes the guy away. A few days later, the old gray Chevy pulls up, and we're on one knee, telling our teacher, who came to visit, telling our teacher all about the beggar and the park ranger. Our teacher shakes his head. So stupid. You guys have no wisdom whatsoever. Buddhism is about not seeking anything. You stopped seeking pretty women and nice cars, and you became monks. And now you are speaking spiritual enlightenment. Same greedy mind, different object. Oh, this wasn't a bodhisattva? No, our teacher said. Probably the real bodhisattva was the park ranger giving you a chance to get your stuff back. We felt so naive, so humiliated. It was the park ranger, not the beggar, who had given us the teaching. He had shown us things as they really were, which is the Dharma. But we had our own reality. We're ready for enlightenment here. We spent a year and a half on the road. We're cold, we're tired. Give us the fruit now. Our teacher shook his head. Anything you seek will obstruct you. And that includes spiritual enlightenment and miraculous signs. Then he opened the trunk of the Chevy and gave us all his clothes. So that's Martin Verhoeven. And so I think that was speaking to me. I was trying so hard, interviewing people, trying to get the truth and what's God like. I really want to know. I want God to throw me a thunderbolt and let me know what's up. And it didn't happen. And so I had to accept that, and I had to accept that I can't know all the answers. And so by the end of this project, I actually had come to a certain point of ease, and Martin Verhoeven would have called it equanimity. So that's one of the Buddhist goals. Compassion, I forget the other two, but compassion is one, and equanimity. And when he told me about this early on, I thought, well, what do you mean by equanimity? That sounds so abstract, and I don't know what it means. But then I think I did discover it in the end. It's just accepting what is, and whatever God is, I'm able to entrust myself to that. So there's other really interesting people in here that you might want to read about. There's an atheist, there's a witch, there's a fundamentalist Christian, there's a progressive Muslim, and there's a minister who decides that maybe God is not good after all. So God's all powerful, but not necessarily good. So lots of interesting people, and then I have little conversations with myself about each one of them. So we can do questions, and you can, or you can
Right.
throw out your own comments and experiences if you like.
I didn't.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I only made it halfway through the book,
Oh, wow.
which I'm really enjoying. But because my daughter was coming, and we just got it at the library, she's got it, because she was gonna try to get it read before the
Oh.
seminar. But I have to say, so far, it's the POW that
Oh.
just stabbed me in the heart.
Yeah.
The POW.
Yeah.
And the description was so vivid. And, of course, most of us here would not be able to relate to what it was like 24 hours a day, day after day after day, but I thought his story just, went deep.
This was a man who survived a forced march across Germany during World War II. And by the end, he hated Germans. And he hated Germans most of his life, and he was bitter, and he became an alcoholic. After World War II, they told the soldiers to just go home and forget about it. And they said, nobody will understand your experience, so don't talk about it, just forget about it, and so he was traumatized, just like a lot of people have been by war, even today still. But he, repressed it and couldn't talk about it, and so he drank. But in the end, he meets some Germans, and so it winds up being all about forgiveness and reconciliation and how he did that. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
Well, it almost, to me, it would correlate with Nelson Mandela. I mean, my God,
Yeah.
what a man. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd be over that in 30 seconds rather than 30 years.
Yeah.
I had a question for you. It sounds like, and I haven't read your book, I plan to buy it this afternoon. Organized Religion versus Spirituality. Diana
Uh-huh.
Butler Bass
Oh, yeah.
has a wonderful book.
Oh.
Religion versus spirituality,
Oh.
because of our beautiful institutions that one time were the center of our community,
Right.
churches, and today, we're losing lots of ground in
Right.
any church, and I've been a member of a couple. And as I listened to that, you use the word fear. I heard you say tough it out.
Mm.
Our own reality. Sometimes I'm so all about me, I don't even walk the walk of any of the great leaders, let alone the Christian leaders supposedly I'm following. So, with all that, I have a question. What do you think? Our churches used to be wonderful centers of the community, and I see them losing such ground. I think Butler Bass just did a wonderful job with her book. Yours will be in a different light, as was David Brooks, who has done a wonderful book on Road to Character, from writing about Mother Teresa to, I think Mandela's in there. And then there's people, Buddhists, So what do you think? Just thoughts on, that wonderful institution that was one time, probably when you were
Yeah, a kid.
frolicking in Bass
Right.
Lake, and I was up in a tiny Minnesota town.
Oh.
And my church was a Catholic church. It was the center of the community. Today I do not profess that faith.
Mhm.
What do you think will happen? Because it's pretty scary for churches, I think.
I know. Evangelical churches are doing better than the mainline, what we used to call the mainline churches, which would be the
Right,
place,
the storefront churches, I call them.
Although even the evangelical churches are not always getting all the members. I noticed that the Baptist church has a huge complex there, and my little old Episcopal church where I was baptized, maybe on the
Me
day
too.
you were.
Me too.
Yeah, I remember I showed up in my jeans for the summer, and a couple of my cousins, maybe it was Mary Helen or maybe Johnny or Kathy, were being baptized that day, so I just was taken in there and got sprinkled the same day. So I know, and notice the Episcopal Church is it's one little building, but the Baptist is maybe, a lot of these full-service churches are maybe doing, mega churches are doing well because they offer all the community activities. But yeah, I really do do a slow burn when people say I'm spiritual but not religious because the religions have done all this damage in the world. And that's just not true. I mean, yes, religions have been a focal point of a lot of the violence, and right now the Sunnis
Well,
and
look
Shias,
at
well, the
your
Sunnis and
history.
Shias have been after each other for years and years, since the beginning. But the religious identity is just one part of a community's identity. There's the language, there's the food and the dancing and the culture and the way people dress. And so somehow religion is getting all the blame for the conflict between communities that are in conflict. That's my opinion. And when something bad happens regarding religion, that gets in the news. But I helped make some sandwiches a couple weeks ago for the homeless, and I just assisted somebody who was taking them. Well, how many acts of generosity like that are being done every minute, every day by people in traditional churches? And the various charitable organizations are